All right, y'all. Hello and welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. With me, Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. And today we've got a very, 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 very interesting conversation for y'all. It's not about politics, but it is about something very interesting in our culture, some of the trends that we're seeing. I'm very excited about this conversation. But before I get into everything, you know what you need to do right now. You need to share this, you need to like this, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you will be notified whenever I upload a new interview. Also, check out my Substack, Chasing Liberty. You can get that at libertychasers.com, which I've been writing about local politics, government corruption, all that great stuff. Become a subscriber. That helps me out a lot. Now, without further ado, we're going to talk about relationships, dating, marriage, and how things are kind of going in a weird direction when it comes to the younger generation. So I have with me Mr. Paul Keable, Chief Strategy Officer of Ashley Madison. Welcome to the program, brother.
Thanks so much for having me today, Jeff.
Awesome. So let's get into this. So there was a very interesting report, a very interesting study that you guys put out recently, and I was just very shocked by it. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, what is Ashley Madison, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So Ashley Madison is the first and premier married dating service. We have more than 20,000 people joining every day, with well over 80 million members having joined the service since we launched back in 2001. And what I like to do is go around talking about what's actually happening in the world of infidelity, not as a way to tell you that, hey, everybody should be cheating, but to give you some insights around what's actually happening versus what you think is happening. So I hope we're going to get into a little bit of that today.
Yeah, definitely. So you guys put out a report based on whatever studies you did with your members. 80 million. I had no idea. That's a lot of cheating. So there was the Generation Z report that analyzed younger users, people of the younger generation, and you had some very interesting findings. How about you kind of highlight some of the most interesting findings from that study about Gen Zers?
I think what we found most interesting, and it alludes to what you talked about in the intro in terms of where is this Generation Z going as relates to relationships and marriage and monogamy, and they are increasingly embracing alternative forms of monogamy. So they are looking at polyamory, open relationships. They're literally saying that the traditional views of monogamy don't fit their viewpoint, don't fit their lifestyle, and they're trying different ways of connecting and making relationships work. And it's fascinating from us because, well, at the heart of Ashley Madison is discretion. That cover gives a lot of room for people who aren't necessarily cheating, because is it cheating if I tell my spouse that I'm going on a date with somebody else and she's okay with it because she's going on a date with someone else herself? Right. But they may not want their parents, their colleagues, their neighbors to know about these activities. And so they use the discretion available at Ashley Madison to join our site to find different partners who are also seeking these type of relationships.
So I think part of the report noted that there was like a surge in membership among younger users, Gen Z. What do you think accounts for this? Like well, actually, let's back up. What do you think is, why does Gen Z have a different view of monogamy and polygamy, like different from older generations like ours?
Well, definitely not polygamy. We're talking polyamory. We're talking polyamory. Monogamy. Polygamy is illegal. But part of it is the awareness that monogamy doesn't work for everybody. It's not inherently wrong, but it doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And a lot of previous generations were certainly participating in non-monogamous activity, usually cheating, but for a variety of reasons, economic, social, they didn't choose to go through with the divorce, but they didn't necessarily lead happy lives. They buried a lot of stuff under the rug. And our members from the Gen Z population have seen this. And with the advent of the internet, the ability to talk to another, people are questioning the foundations of monogamy and saying, hey, maybe it doesn't work for me. Doesn't mean it's wrong, but it doesn't work for me. And they're trying out different ways of connecting and creating a modern monogamous relationship. And so they'll have potential hierarchical partners where you might have a primary partner and then someone who's separate for different types of activities. And they're very open with their primary partners about what they're doing, with whom they're doing it. And they're finding a lot of joy, a lot of satisfaction, and they're finding out who they are. And again, because some of the older generations still, frown upon it and shame them, and they, parents are, involved in our kids' lives, they're still seeking that discretion. So they're doing it under the cover of darkness to a degree.
So basically, they're doing what previous generations have done. They're just more honest about it, basically.
I think so, and that's one of the fun things that I like to talk about. Working in Ashley Madison, compared to more traditional dating sites like a Match or a Tinder, our members honestly are far more honest than any other daters, because once you join a site like Ashley Madison, you're already acknowledging that you're looking for something a little different, something a little outside of the mainstream. And so you are usually coming for a very specific type of engagement. And there's no point trying to pretend to be something you're not. So when you're on Match, often you're looking for a potential life partner, and so you're putting your best self out there. So maybe not really dishonest, but it's not the whole picture. Whereas on Ashley Madison, people come on and say, hey, listen, this is who I am. I'm a 49-year-old, formerly married, separated guy, and this is what I'm looking for. And if it fits with you, awesome. But if it doesn't, that's okay. It doesn't make me bad. It doesn't make you bad. We're just not a good match.
So when it comes to monogamy or non-monogamy, what's very interesting that really stood out to me about this report is that I've seen other studies showing that Generation Z is a lot less sexually promiscuous than prior generations, especially Gen X. So do you, when we're talking about Gen Z looking into more polyamorous relationships or non-monogamous, how much of this is really sexual, or is this more like an emotional type of thing? They want different partners to fulfill an emotional need, or is it, how much? I mean, I know it's both, but how much of it is either or?
And I think, this surprises a lot of people, because Gen Z is both one of the most openly adventurous sexual generations, but also report after report has shown they are increasingly less likely to have sex compared to some of their previous cohorts. And the rationale around that, based on what I've observed, so I'm a Gen X person, and I remember growing up, the pressure, to have that first sexual experience, the pressure to sort of be seen as a sexual being was very intense. As a teenager and leading your 20s. And the idea always was that everybody else was doing it, so you've got to get in, otherwise you're missing out, you're not, mature, all these different forms of pressure that were put on you. And you'd see all these great movies and TV shows, and everybody was beautiful and had amazing, great sex. Gen Z is a lot more informed. They're a lot more aware of what's going on. And that pressure to perform isn't the same as what we had. And so they're not feeling the need to do it in the manner which we felt we needed to. And so they're more looking for what works for me, what's right for me, versus just getting it done to say, I've gotten it done, which was really sort of that badge of honor that Gen X had to wear for a lot of times. So
you check out that box.
And so there's a very different set of pressures that have been alleviated from Gen Z. And what it's allowing them to do is be more honest to themselves and to their potential partners to say, this is what I'm looking for. So it doesn't need to be, traditional sex every single time. So they're looking for not necessarily just emotional or sex, they're looking for an intimacy. And that can encompass a lot of different behaviors and a lot of different activities. And they're looking for partners that address different sorts of needs and wants within that framework. And so they understand that not one person always can deliver on that. So think about it. For us, or for me, again, I'm just going to say I'm Gen X. We were raised with the idea that our partner, our spouse, is going to be our best friend, our co-parent, our economic partner, our social coordinator. That's a lot of pressure for one person to hold in connection with a singular relationship. And that leads to a lot of fractures in relationships and to a lot of divorces. And what Gen Z is saying, hey, don't put all that pressure on one person, because potentially I can find it in multiple people. And they're just being a little bit more honest with themselves and saying, listen, monogamy might work down the line, but right now it's not for me. and I want to experience a lot of different things with a lot of different types of people.
Wow. So and you can refresh my memory. Did the reports say that most Gen Zers were open to polyamorous relationships or non-monogamous, or are they actually doing it?
So they over-index on it. So not all of them, but there's a much greater cohort. So it was interesting. I think I saw for signups for Ashley Madison this year, we were about 35% were Gen Z. And the US population in Gen Z is about 23%. So that's a significant over-indexing on our site, which tells you that that population certainly is embracing it. But of course, not everyone. As I sort of talked about at the beginning, monogamy does work for a lot of people. Part of it is because that's, what is the default for most of Western civilization. And it's what we're told by our government, by our parents, by our friends. That's the way to do these things. And so it still does work for a lot of people. And that's amazing. And that's the one thing I think people do misunderstand about our business. As great as I am at my job, no 30-second, commercial is going to be able to convince a happily married couple that non-monogamy or cheating is for them.
Right.
What we're really doing is saying, listen, this is happening. Let's talk about why it's happening, what's really behind it. And in doing so, give you a bit of a view, because it might work for you, but it might reaffirm your beliefs that, no, I don't need this. I'm really happy in my traditional monogamous relationship. And like, kudos to you. That's great. Awesome. I'm so happy for you. But for those where it doesn't work, we're out there telling them, here's what's happening. Here's why you should do it. And here's, more importantly, how you should do it, because there's a lot of wrong ways to go about having an affair.
So how much do you think that, the advent of social media, other types of technology, everybody's online now, how much do you think this is contributing to this shift?
Well, huge. Because it's exposing a lot of different people's opinions and behaviors, and showing that the way I think, in an isolated fashion, pre-internet world where I couldn't, discuss these things or really research them. Like, where were you going to look up polyamory and non-monogamy pre-internet? Didn't exist, right? So you would talk to your buddy or your girlfriend and maybe like, are you crazy? We're not doing that. And what this allows is people to passively look into what's actually happened. And you see these communities that are very open and vocal. So that at the top of the chain, there's a lot of people who live within the non-monogamous community who are very vocal about why they do it, the benefits for them. And it gives people the ability to understand it. And I think that's really powerful, to showcase the normalization of alternative relationship frameworks. Gives people permission within, the consenting adult world to do things that previous generations were far less likely to and were far less knowledgeable about. And so certainly that's giving room for it. But the reason we still see 20,000+ join up every single day is that societal pressures are still pretty extreme for a lot of people, and they need that discretion. They need that ability to explore without everybody knowing their business. Not everyone is going to be super comfortable announcing that they have 3 different partners. They want to have that experience, but they don't want the world watching, and so that's why we exist.
Okay, so and that's interesting to me, because I agree that there is more of an acceptance of this. I mean, I've over the years I've seen God knows how many op-eds talking about polyamory and people in open relationships and what have you. I mean, there's even been TV shows about it. And I mean, even like shows like Sister Wives. I mean, that was, it wasn't quite polyamory, but it was, well, in that vein, I suppose. It's definitely not monogamy.
Yeah, and there was big love before that. And there's certainly always going to be sort of a prurient interest in shows of that nature. And they're a little bit, Hollywood-fied, and they're not necessarily the truth. And I think a lot of people in the communities that those shows try to represent would say, listen, there's some aspects that are correct, and there's a lot that is scandalized or sensationalized.
Yeah.
You want it on, you want people watching, and we're not out there trying to sensationalize it. We're trying to be honest about what's actually happening. So things like, is it a big orgy every weekend? No. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of that going on for some people, but for the most part, no, that's not what's happening. People think about it this way. You have multiple friends from different places and different groups that don't necessarily cohabitate, in a social scene. And so you go out with your golf buddies over here, but you go out with your, Dungeons and Dragon friends over here and your poker friends over here, and they don't necessarily mix. And that idea is really what's happening in a lot of this non-monogamous world, is that I have different intimate partners that fulfill different needs and desires and wants, because they don't match over here, but they do match over here. And that's because we're very dynamic people. We have a range of interests. And for a lot of people, again, monogamy just doesn't allow for those interests to be fulfilled. And so either you compromise, which again, some people make that choice, or you look to an alternative route to say, maybe I can have it all, and my partner can be aware of it. And if we're both satisfied, who are we hurting?
Yeah, and so and when I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, because I was thinking that too, like just like people have different groups of friends that they hang out with. Some might be, bowling or golfing or just like you said, Dungeons and Dragons. And the conventional wisdom before, because I'm barely Gen X. I was born in 1980. So if I would have been born a year later, I'd be in a millennials. But so I mean, I understand what you're talking about as far as the societal pressure to have sexual conquests and all this stuff. But the idea was that, if you're using conventional wisdom, like you marry one person, but you understand that you still have to have friends, like maybe you go bowling or you go hunting, things that your spouse might not be interested in, but you have other people for that. But they're not necessarily romantic relationships, right?
Right.
So what I'm wondering is, why has it transitioned from the conventional wisdom of, you and I of our age to more, okay, but no, this has to be something more romantic, as far as, having people fulfill other interests that you might have.
Well, I think part of that comes down to people's awareness of different intimate interests, where, growing up, we very much had a very singular sense of what sex looked like,
Mhm.
man, woman. And there was, a few things that, when you shared your dad's dirty magazines, and you got a sense of a few actions that you might want to try, but there wasn't this range of activities that we're now really aware of. And there's a lot of sexual acts and desires that don't fit in with the mainstream. And so whether
Mm.
it's cosplay, whether it's impact play, there's certain elements that people are far more aware of and are interested in, and your primary partner may not enjoy them, may not desire them, and so you still want to have that experience. And that is why this younger generation is saying, hey, there is a range of activities that not one person could possibly be completely interested in, but I have, these three things that I like, and my partner likes two of them, but not one of them. So maybe I
Mm.
never get to do that. Okay, I agree with that. I'm okay with it. Or we have a chat, we converse, we say, if I get to do this with this person, she's okay with it, so long as there's only this one thing. And that's
Okay.
why you're seeing these types of behaviors, because people are understanding that the range of intimate options is nearly unlimited with a consensual partner. But there's no way that my one partner is going to 100% match all of my interests, or unlikely to, let's put it that way. And so they're saying, I really want to do this stuff. I want to, dress up in leather. And my partner doesn't want to do that. I want to get the whips and chains out. I want to do candle wax. Whatever it is, again, within a consenting partner, it's awesome, but not everyone's going to be involved with it. So we become an option to explore those spaces.
Okay. Okay. And that's kind of why I was asking about the sexual aspect of it before, because it does sound like this is more sexual. Because, like, well, like I was saying, if you like to go bowling, but your wife doesn't, then
Right.
you can just go bowling with the boys or whatever. But this is very much sexual. So, even just like you said before, Gen Z is more open to other types of sexuality and sexual experiences,
Right.
even if they're not as promiscuous. So
Right.
it does, yeah. It is, when you were talking, I was, you've seen the show Billions, right?
Yes.
Paul Giamatti's character. That's what they were doing. Like, I mean, they were a couple, and then he had his whole thing. Although she did participate in it, but I mean, if he got her permission, then he can go do it by himself.
And that's exactly what it is. And again, in that scenario, it wasn't supposed to be exposed to the world, but because there's consequences because of the shame we put on our sexual intimate desires still in Western civilization, particularly in America, where it's very, very puritanical and starting to lean a little bit more to the right side of things. And the harder, society squeezes on that, the harder that pressure comes, the more people often desire that and look for that. And that's why, again, that discretion becomes so important. I mean, in a perfect world, discretion wouldn't be needed. We'd be a little bit more open and honest about what we're looking for. But we live in a world where infidelity, in fact, is the only sin in the Ten Commandments twice. The only
Mm.
sin that gets in there twice, but somehow we get in there twice. So there's still a lot of pressure from society to conform. And so the cracks are showing up. Gen Z is certainly pushing that envelope, and the next generation will push it more. And when we say they're pushing the envelope, when we say they're changing the discourse, I don't think that that's deviant. They're saying we want to be more honest. We want to be more open. We want to be more fulsome in our relationships and not have to do it the way previous generations did under the cover of darkness, because that leads to a lot of, continuance of the shame. They don't want that, but they still understand it exists. So they're living in a bit of a hybrid world where they want to push to be more open and clear with the world, but also recognizing, hey, there's consequences to that. And so we're still not all the way over to the point where people could be honest about what they're doing. And until such time, I think we'll probably be doing a pretty good job for them.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, you are right. I mean, we are still pretty conservative in how we see these relationships. Like me personally, I am conservative, even though I'm a libertarian politically. Like a lot of the stuff, I was like, this ain't for me. Like I'm a one woman guy, and that's it. I'd never want to use the government to force people to live this way or whatever. But just for me personally, I just wouldn't do it. But I do see a shift in society. I mean, we elected a guy who cheated on his wife while she was pregnant with a porn star. So, I mean, to me, I think there is a shift happening, whether it's right or wrong. I think America is, and this report seems to prove that attitudes are shifting towards different types of relationships. My question: what do you think will be the long-term implications of this as this continues? Because I do believe it is going to continue.
Any movement that helps reduce shame on, consenting adults' activities, whether it's sexual or intimate in nature, really doesn't matter. I mean, you don't have to go that far back in our history where the idea of interracial marriage was both illegal and wildly immoral. And I won't say we're at a point where everyone accepts that today. We're much further along, though, right? Yeah. And that was to our benefit as a society. That is to benefit of the human condition, that we accept that others love one another. I'm Canadian. Ashley Madison was founded in Canada. Same-sex marriage.
I kind of detected an accent there. You just didn't say A, so I wasn't sure.
Not say it. Same-sex marriage has been legal here for almost the majority of my life. I think it was in the early 90s. It's been around for so long, I forget when we legalized it. And we were one of the first 4 or 5 countries in the world to have done that. And again, that was to the benefit of society. That was to the benefit of the human condition. And what Gen Z is pushing for is more honesty in relationships, more openness about who we are as people. And I cannot imagine how you can argue against that when people are saying, I want to have good partnerships. I want to be a good person and have my intimate needs met. And it's not again, drug-fueled orgy every weekend where they're, abandoning their parental responsibilities. Listen, people live longer lives, we're healthier, and we're aware of our intimate needs in a different capacity. And the more we can be honest with each other, the better our relationships are going to be. You will see a decrease in divorces and relationship breakups when people are far more likely to be honest with their partner about what's not there. We actually did a study, I guess about 6 or 7 years ago, with the University of Missouri. And Dr. Alicia Walker was looking at, why do women on Ashley Madison cheat? What's the reason behind it? And this was really illuminating for me, and to help people understand why it happens. Because Hollywood tells us that a woman who cheats is lonely and sad, and she's emotional, and she wants her psychological aspect addressed. That is the complete opposite of what's happening.
Really?
Absolutely. 80% of the women on Ashley Madison in this study were choosing to cheat because they were in a orgasmless or sexless marriage. They loved their spouse. They did not want to lose any function of their relationship because it was awesome. Everything about it was great, except that one part, and they were unwilling to compromise. And it doesn't make sense. Like, will you really blow up your whole family simply because you weren't having good sex? That seems a little bit silly. Mm-hmm. Whereas you go to your partner and say, listen, you're either unable to do this, sometimes it's medical, or you're unwilling to do it. And okay, that being what we talked about earlier, not all of my interests are going to match my partner's interests. What's wrong with her going outside and getting that need met and fulfilled, and then coming back to her primary partner? And we hear this all the time. Women will tell us, I am now a better mother, a better lover, and a better wife because of my affair. And that sounds shocking.
Mm.
Here's the flip side to that. Dr. Walker also then looked at, in a separate study, why do the men cheat? If women are out there solely for sex, then what are the men doing? Because that's what we were told the men were there for. That they're all guys, and they're trying.
Are you about to blow up my bubble here? Because that's what
I am. I'm going to eradicate your bubble. Men in this study on Ashley Madison were choosing to have affairs because they were looking to have their emotional needs validated. They needed to be wanted. They needed to be desired. They want to be told they look good. Here's the thing about men. If a woman tells a man a compliment, hey, you look really good in that suit last night. Let me tell you how long that guy's going to hold on to that compliment. Yep. We don't get them very much in society because we're told to be the big, tough guy. We're not supposed to, have any emotional needs. And that's what all these guys are doing. And it's fascinating because, one, I'm sure you've heard this before. And, this was an old trope that prostitutes would always say, like, some guys just come just to talk. And we'd be like, oh, that's a bunch of crap. There's no way that's true. Turns out it is.
Yeah, I have heard that.
Yeah. And what was interesting, it leads to one of the bigger complaints that I've heard from the females on Ashley Madison is that some guys don't want to go through with it. All they want is the opportunity to be desired. And when they get that, that's enough. I could cheat because she wants me, but I won't cheat because I don't need to. All I wanted was to be desired. And that's fascinating, right? Because it's the flip of what everybody thinks about why men and why women cheat and what they're actually looking for. And so when you know that going in, it suddenly changes the dynamic and the conversations are really, really different. And what Gen Z is saying, hey, we acknowledge this. A woman can have sexual agency over her intimate needs and say, there's certain things I need for good sex. And for that to happen, I might need more than one partner at different times. Or sometimes. And men are like, yeah, but I want to be wanted. I want to be desired. I want to be told that I'm pretty. And what's wrong with that? And the more people are aware of what is really going on versus what we've been told to be, I think that's going to be better for us, from a relationship standpoint. But yeah, it's going to look really different in 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah, I think so. And I see what you're saying too, because men at their core, we want to be respected, we want to be admired. So your explanation actually does make a lot of sense. And it's to me, and it is interesting because that reminded me because my girlfriend's really good about that. Like this that I'm wearing right now, she loves it on me, and she will tell me. And you're right, I love it. It's a little weird because I'm not used to it, but I love it. So.
The easiest, listen, women, if you're listening to me, all you got to do is tell a guy a couple nice compliments every once in a while, and he will be the most doting, devoted partner you could possibly imagine because we don't get it. Society thinks we don't need it, and we're unwilling to say that because we're told not to. The pressure's on what it is to be a man. Now, that's not to say that, we have it the hardest, because I'm not saying that whatsoever.
No, yeah.
In our world, we still live in a world where women face far more pressure and pushback when they have sexual agency. We still live in, the Madonna whore complex world where the idea that a woman has sexual agency, we still slut shame her to no end. Any idea of, when a celebrity athlete male cheats or, Hollywood male celebrity cheats, people are like, yeah, of course, this guy cheated. Look at him. He's good looking. He's got a six pack, he's Hollywood. I get it. He's a guy. I don't like it, but I get it. But a woman does it. Oh my God, she's horrible. She's a whore. She's the worst person alive. We should take her kids away from her. We're not that far away from a world where a woman who was caught cheating, lost her kids, lost her economic means, and you go back a little bit further, and they were literally putting scarlet letter A's on their chest. So let's be real. There's women face a lot more pressures than men in that space.
So okay, so here's my conservative Christian pushback. So we're talking about a situation like say we have a couple, a man and a woman, whatever, and the man's not getting enough compliments from his wife, or she doesn't make him feel desired, so he goes out and gets that from somewhere else, whether he's doing it openly or covertly. And then on the other hand, you mentioned women are not sexually fulfilled. Maybe she wants some of those whips and chains. Maybe she wants to be a furry, whatever. I don't care. But here's my thing. if that is what your wife wants, what people like myself would say, then yeah, you should be doing that. You may not love it, it may not be the greatest thing in the world, but you should do what you need to do to fulfill that need for your wife. And on the other end, your wife needs to, take responsibility and say, and make you feel desired. Say those things. You look nice, and that tie looks great on you. Things like that. And a lot of times, it's really little stuff that's not very hard to do. We just don't do it. We become complacent. So so from my perspective, it's like, why not just have the two people in that couple do what they need to do to fulfill those needs, instead of just saying, oh, we'll just get it somewhere else.
Well, I think, if that was true and that was happening, then we wouldn't exist and the human condition would be completely different.
It put you out of business.
I applaud your initiative, but here's the reality. There are certain things I'm not just not interested in, I'm disinterested in. And if it's not going to be a turn on for me, if it's not going to, give me pleasure, why would I ask my partner, why would I do something that I'm really against? Now, there's a difference between saying it doesn't do anything for me, but I'm not against it. Okay, I agree with you. That's a place where people should have open conversations and say, yeah, let's talk about that. It's not my thing, but I'm comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some things your partner's not going to want to do. Like literally, I don't do that. It's not my bag. This is the problem. One, we don't have open communications.
Right.
We don't, because men are afraid to ask for certain things because it's going to make them appear not to be manly. And so there's the shame that it surrounds all of our sexual conversations, particularly, again, in America, because of our puritanical sort of leanings. And we don't have that capacity. And we're told, once you get married, that's it. That's your one and only partner. And you make do. Like, I can't tell you how many times we've heard, from our members, our female members, that were, when they were raised, they were told, listen, once you get married, you just put up with what your husband wants and you do what he likes. And for a lot of these women, they're not looking for, the whips and the chains. A lot of these women are just looking for good sex. They want to have an orgasm. And men don't know how to do that because there is no sexual education across America that helps people. We talk about things like how to prevent pregnancy and how to prevent STDs, but what we don't ever talk about, and this seems weird to me, that we don't talk about what is good sex. I mean,
yeah, we're the same age range, and we never learned that in school. Yeah.
No,
here's my thing. Everybody has a computer in your pocket. You can look that up. But that goes back to communication, though. We don't communicate the way we should.
We don't communicate. We don't give permission to our partners to be, vulnerable and talk about it. Like, think about it. 80% of women don't achieve orgasm through penis to vagina sex. Mm-hmm. They need direct clitoral stimulation. That's a conversation you will never hear, in a school setting to a teenager, because we think it's abhorrent. We think it's bad. And I'm like, why? Like, I am a father. I'm a father of two boys. Why wouldn't I want my kids to grow up to be good, intimate partners for their partners? Why wouldn't I want that? And if I had a daughter, why wouldn't I want her to know what good sex is and looks like and feels like and sounds like? And again, I'm not saying, throw up the Pornhub and do a tutorial, but there are ways to have really smart conversations about this. And there's a great person, Cindy Gallup. She's out there talking about this all the time, and I find her fascinating. She is very much at the forefront of talking about what sexual education should be so that people, yes, have the safety conversations. And listen, we've moved along that spectrum a long way, because what you and I would have had growing up was very much wear the condom, no babies, no STIs.
Yeah.
Great. And listen, that's a good starting point. But now, my kids are hearing about, consent, which is another really incredibly important part. But all of those conversations are rooted in the negative aspects of sex, in a sense, all the bad outcomes, which is, leaning into the shame of sex. Don't talk about the pleasures, the positive things. Because listen, if you've had good sex, I'm going to tell you, most people want to have it again because it's pretty awesome, right? So why aren't we creating an environment so that people can be more honest about their emotions, be more open about it? And I think Gen Z is acknowledging this within themselves and saying, hold on, the way you guys, their parents and the older generations were raised, are saying there's something wrong inherently with it, because we're not being honest and truthful about it. We're not giving permission to each other to say, I've had this desire, I've had this thought. It doesn't make me a weirdo. Just because I've thought about it doesn't necessarily mean I want to do it, but I want to understand it. And so the more we have these conversations, the more we give permission to one another to acknowledge that we have different desires, the better off as a society we're going to be. And, from a religious standpoint, I understand that, we are very much told to conform to a certain way, but even those things move. They're a little slower because, again, like we talked about, interracial marriage was very much
right.
The good Christians argued the Bible said this wasn't a good thing. It was ungodly to have this happen. We've certainly moved past that, thankfully. And now we're at the sexual world where, people are using the Bible in the, whether it's a good Christian way or, the Hindu way or whatever, religion you believe in says we shouldn't be doing this. Now, I'm not advocating for anything that is anti-consent, nothing that is going to be physically harmful. But, you put those things aside, there's suddenly a range of activities that people can be really interested in that are pleasurable, that are enjoyable and not detrimental in any way, but we choose to put so much shame around them, people are afraid of them, and that is where the problems truly lie.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and in a lot of that, we as a culture and as a country, we've put on ourselves. I mean, especially Christians. I mean, they portray sex as this not negative, but you're right. They talk about the negative aspects of it or the bad parts of it. But to me, I think there's something to be said for what we're seeing here, because you're right. People aren't talking about these things honestly. They're not talking about them positively. And honestly, any Christian who thinks that the Bible has a negative view about sex has never read Song of Solomon. I mean, that is a
more
very
in the Bible than just about any other book out there. And I know that, a lot of times when people start banning books that, touch on, sexual taboo topics that they don't want their kids seeing. And again, as a parent, you have to make these choices.
right.
But you really looked at the Bible, there's a lot of sex going on. And
Song of Solomon can read like some pornography if you understand what they're actually saying.
right, exactly. And again, we're animalistic in our core. Human nature is such that we want to have sex. We are, our hormones push us towards that, but our brains allow us to interpret that in a really different way. And we are finding there's all sorts of pathways to enjoyable, intimate encounters. And if we could ever truly remove the shame associated with so much of it, we're going to be better off. And what Gen Z is showing, and I think this is the part that maybe gets underplayed a little bit too much, is when we talk about them having less sex than previous generations, that's not a negative. What it's showing you is that you can be open to different activities, open to different partners. And it's not because you're seeking to have some sort of deviant behavior where you're just having sex 24/7. That's not what they're looking for. They're just looking for, at the time and moment that this activity interests me, I want to have someone I can do it with. But it's not an all the time thing. They're actually more evolved and mature on matters when it comes to sex than previous generations. And the part about them having less sex is very telling. It's not that they're turning away from it. They don't feel the need to have it all the time. But when they do want to have sex, when they do want to have an intimate encounter, they want to be able to do it in a way that fits their needs.
Yeah, they want to get freaky.
You.
So is this mainly like an American phenomenon, or are you seeing this across the board in like Canada or the Western Europe, or what are some of the differences culturally? Because I know culture plays into a lot of this, and you mentioned America's more puritanical culture. What are you seeing in your country and in UK, France, and all the others? Is it kind of the same thing going on, or is it a little bit different?
Canada very much mirrors the American sort of culture in a lot of ways. There's some nuances, obviously. We're a little bit more open. I mean, if you look at it from a political spectrum, our former Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, not his son, Justin Trudeau, he was very famous for removing some of the sodomy laws in Canada because he said the government of Canada has no business in the bedroom.
Right.
And that was a really powerful statement. He's basically saying, so long as it is consenting adults, it's none of my damn business as a politician what the hell you're doing behind closed doors. And that was the starting point for a really different approach. So we're not quite as puritanical. We're a little bit more open. We've had some really great sexual educators here. Someone who just recently passed away, Dr. Sue Johansson. She was amazing. Sex with Sue here was, your Dr. Ruth Westheimer in terms of celebrity sex educators. But she was really honest. She was really direct. It was amazing to have those conversations. And what we see here is a little less of the shame, but the Gen Z trend is happening around the world because they are connecting with each other. they're seeing the same sort of touch points that say, listen, I'm interested in all sorts of range of activities. The biggest difference is there's not as much shame connected to a lot of this behavior in other places as it is here, or as it is in the United States. So I think it's more prevalent in terms of the discretion required, and the shame associated with a lot of these activities, where there's a much more vocal, open community in a lot of different countries.
Great. So last question. As far as like the future goes, I mean, I see, and you've explained it to me, and that, I see in this report that a lot of this is more about open communication, things like that. I'm sure that most of Gen Z is still going to be monogamous. How do you,
Likely.
yeah, and how do you, but do you think that there's a possibility that maybe this shift in the way people are thinking could make for better communication in monogamous relationships as well?
100%. The more you are able to talk to your partner and be open and vulnerable with your partner, and have a partner who accepts that. So it's not just me being willing to espouse my views and concerns and desires. I have to have a partner that I feel comfortable with doing that, who is receptive to that. When the judgment is added, that's when people pull back. And that is the cause for a lot of problems in relationships. It's a lack of communication. And where that stems from is, I don't trust either you as my partner to accept my views or receive them in an open way. Doesn't mean you're going to agree with them, but you're not going to judge me. And if I don't trust you, then possibly I don't trust myself. And it's a really bad cycle. So traditional monogamous relationships will dramatically benefit from more open and vulnerable conversations. And not just because it will lead to, polyamory or non-monogamy. It's not going to. Again, if you're happily married and your desires are being met and your needs are being met, I can't convince you to change your views on monogamy. That's not the point of that. But your relationship will get better and deepen if you are more honest and trusting with your partner on both sides of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Because they might have, and again, it's not always just sex. There's a range of things your partner might want to discuss with you that don't conform to traditional Western values and views. Mm-hmm. And if you don't let them talk about it, that could lead to a lot of different behaviors. Yes. One of the things I find interesting about working for this company, we're the world's largest married dating service, right? Great. A little bit of marketing spiel. We're also the world's largest marriage counseling service, because if you don't want your partner on Ashley Madison, you should listen to me as to why people come to the site. Address those things within your relationship and prevent it long before it happens. Now, listen, I'm not in the business of shutting down my business, but I can help you probably a little bit.
Well, I mean, and I'm sure there's still going to be plenty of business no matter how this goes. But I mean, you touched on something that I wanted to say too. It's like for people watching this, and you're more of a conservative Christian type, and you prefer monogamy, and you think society should be monogamous. Well, maybe taking some of that stigma and shame off a lot of these conversations and fostering better communication and education about these issues. What Paul is saying is actually going to help us be more monogamous and to stay with our partners, stay with our wives and husbands and what have you. There's a lot of wisdom here, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, because for my audience, first glance at this, they're like, oh, the world's going to hell. I mean, if this is what's going on, oh yeah, America's done. Not necessarily.
Right.
Not if we approach this in the right way as a community, as a culture. If we can talk about these things, then if you want more monogamy, that's actually going to help.
Absolutely. There has never been a point in history where relationships have had a negative interaction when people have been more honest and truthful. Yeah. Over the course of history, the relationships that are more honest, are more open in their communications, are the ones that survive, regardless of the nature of them. And so it doesn't matter if you have 10 partners or one, being honest, being open, and being truthful is going to be the bedrock to a good and successful relationship.
Yes, indeed. Awesome. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. Maybe we can have you on to talk about other stuff related to this. But before we sign off, let everybody know where they can find you.
Listen, ashleymadison.com.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for coming on. I'll talk to you later.
Appreciate it, Jeff. Have a great day.